I was perpetually the new kid at school, but books were familiar and non-judgmental, and I didn't have to perform for them or fit in with them. I'm here today because I'm about to release my first children's book, which is called Natalie Portman's Fables, with beautiful illustrations by Janna Mattia and published by Jean Fywell. And books have always loomed large in my life. As an only child who was constantly moving, books were my constant companions. I was perpetually the new kid at school, but books were familiar and non-judgmental, and I didn't have to perform for them or fit in with them. As I started working on films at age 11, books stayed with me as modes of escape, stimulation, and friendship, as I was usually the only child at work and almost always the only female at work, with long periods of waiting for the next shot. They were my way of understanding what life was like for kids with siblings, kids who didn't work, kids in other countries, kids with parents who weren't foreign like mine, kids who were boys. They helped me be less of a stranger, and at the same time, and for which I'm forever grateful, maybe also a bit more strange. My parents would always scold me in the car for not looking out the window and always having my eyes glued down on the page. But the books held the world that I cared to look at, and they shaped the world for me in a way that affects me to this day. So storytelling is, of course, the foundation of empathy. When we spend hours caring about what happens to others, we're practicing that care for others in the larger world. So when I was in college, we learned about theory of mind, where children learn that others have separate minds from their own, and it develops around age 3. It's the time that kids go from thinking that everyone shares the same information and experiences in their head to understanding that people have different information and experiences. So for example, there's a famous study in which a young child is presented with a box of jelly beans, but when she looks inside, a springy toy snake pops out and surprises her. And then when the child is asked, oh, your friend is coming into the room, what would she think is in the box? The child says a snake, until about age 3. And then after age 3, the child starts to understand that the friend would expect jelly beans. She understands that her friend didn't have the experience that she just did of seeing the snake. So I started thinking, what happens to this child when storytelling is introduced? She's allowed to imagine others' minds. I know when I was a kid, reading books about animals and watching cartoons of animals made me innately believe that animals had thoughts, feelings, and language between them, even if it was dissimilar and not understandable to us. And I think that was a major influence on my choice to become a vegetarian at age 9, which continues to this day. But when I had children of my own, I have a son who was born in June 2011 and a daughter who was born in February of 2017. I had a new realization about what kinds of minds are being represented for children. So when my son was born, and as he's grown up, he receives gifts of what I'd call normal books, books that are intended for the general population, the classics, many of which I grew up with too. But when my daughter was born, and as she's been growing up, she receives almost only feminist kid books. And now, listen, I love feminist kid books, but first of all, the boys need them more than the girls do. And secondly, it feels a little bit sad and a little bit early to explain to your 3-year-old that she will have hurdles in her life because of her gender and that she can overcome them, and check out these empowering figures that came before you to give you resilience against all the sexism you should anticipate. I was, of course, also reading her the not explicitly gendered books that we had received for my son or that we had bought. But soon I noticed another difficulty. Almost all of those centered on male characters, even the animal ones. And when there were female characters, they were usually far outnumbered by the males. And then I saw that even my own instinct, like if I saw a squirrel in the park, I would assign it a male gender. I'd be like, look how cute he is. And despite having any zoological evidence or knowledge that that's a female squirrel or a male squirrel. So Anyway, I started changing the pronouns when I read her the books, but I know she'll be reading on her own soon, and then she'll absorb that message that these books are collectively sending. What happens if at the same time that children develop the theory of mind, that others have emotions, thoughts, motives different than our own, that we're valuing male stories over female ones? So it seems like it might have an impact on how females are socialized to read others' minds, namely male minds. We as girls have so much practice at thinking about how boys must feel, how they must think, how they must see the world, that we're primed to do the same as adults. Do they think I'm nice? Does he think I'm pretty? What movie does he want to see? Am I being annoying, too loud, too dumb, too fat? We are often experts at seeing the world through others' eyes and not enough through our own. And conversely, boys don't have enough practice at reading girls' minds. And then they often get themselves into trouble when they're older by not understanding how their actions might affect the female opposite them, or what the female opposite them might want or not want. So maybe that's taking things far from the Three Little Pigs to adult sexual politics. But yes, I drew that line. And so I wanted to see how I could preserve the stories I love that have valuable messages while also creating a world of animals that simply has a gender distribution that reflected nature. I wanted to have animal stories rather than human characters because I felt that all kids would have equal entry points relating to the characters. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Ann M. Martin's The Babysitter's Club, as I know many young girls are. I think that by the time I had grown out of the series, I had read maybe 450 of the books. I would identify with the characters in different ways, but there was one way in which I didn't see myself reflected in the series. During sleepovers, my best friend Julie and I, we would dial all the Ann Martins in the New York phone book to see if we could give her our feedback. But after we called like 30 with no luck, we got bored and we made a new plan. So our local children's bookstore in Woodbury on Long Island was hosting Ms. Martin for a book signing. And I remember preparing my presentation for her and like choosing my best newsboy cap and my Doc Martens for the big day. And I waited in line for 4 hours with my parents, thank you parents, to present her with my offering. I presented a new character for her to introduce, and she would be a Jewish character because I wanted to see myself. I remember picking her favorite colors, purple and yellow, and her favorite subjects in school, English and biology, and her favorite extracurricular activities, singing and dancing. But what it made me realize now is how strong my desire was to see myself, my own particularity represented in the books I read. Even though there were characters in Ms. Martin's book from all different backgrounds and all different personalities, a few of whom I could relate to, I wanted to see someone specifically from my culture there, to be seen and acknowledged and counted. When my whole world was ensconced in all things babysitters, if someone like me wasn't in the story in a central way, I didn't exist. I understood then how much representation matters. So I hoped with my book that if the characters were animals, kids could all have the same access points and would relate more by character or personality than the specifics of how someone looked or what religious insignia they might wear. Also, as a footnote, unrelated to me, Ms. Martin has since introduced a Jewish character. But I wanted to use the classic stories because I didn't want to throw out classic tales with hundreds of years of tradition that actually had valuable morals at the root. I just wanted to make them reflective of all genders and hopefully inspire empathy toward all genders. So the messages in the stories have little to do with gender and are perhaps all odes to attentiveness. The Tortoise and the Hare was the first one I started with, which felt especially poignant as this fast-paced moment we live in. And then I chose the Three Little Pigs, which is classified more as a fairy tale, but felt to me to fit in as an animal-centered tale, urging attention in building strong and healthy foundations. And lastly, I chose the City Mouse and the Country Mouse, which merits nature and the art of watching the stars over a city party life. So they're good old-fashioned stories, but they're gender safe for the parents that want all their kids, regardless of gender, to practice empathizing with all different points of view. And the process has been incredibly joyful, getting to the stories to the page. I've been blessed to work with the great Jean Fywell, who incidentally helped form the Babysitters Club series that was so central to my youth. And Janna Mattia created gorgeous illustrations at every stage, so that most of my notes were just, wow, how did she come up with that? So I'm just so excited to share this book.